Hey everyone, it's been around 6 months since my last video, so it's time for another update. If you're wondering what I've done so far, my 12-month video briefly covers most of it, so check that out if you're interested. And yeah, apart from that, as always, I'll start with how my Anki's been going. So, I have made some changes to Anki since my last update. I was previously doing around 25 sentence cards a day, which I was happy with, but I eventually wanted to swap over to vocab cards since, at the point I'm currently at, I didn't really feel like the sentence cards were completely necessary anymore. The first week was a bit rough though, as I had a lot of cards that I had to relearn instead of just recognising the context of the sentence. But after that initial struggle, I could start to see some good progress, and my Anki times also dropped to around 30 to 40 minutes a day. After feeling quite comfortable with the swap, I also decided to increase my new cards per day to 50, which was definitely a bit ambitious for me. It was okay for around 2 months, but eventually I did actually start to find it quite hard to find 50 new words per day that were still relatively common, so I ended up just adding every unknown word. Honestly, this kind of made me hate Anki as the reviews were piling up pretty fast, and at that point it was taking more than an hour per day. After a few weeks of this, I did burn out of Anki, but also Japanese in general, so I took a few weeks away from immersing, stopped adding new cards, and only spent around 10 to 20 minutes per day on reviews. After taking a short break, I did lower my new cards per day to only 10, so I could give myself a bit of time to catch up with reviews. It's definitely more manageable now, and even when I add uncommon words, I'm finding it a lot easier to try and recall 1 or 2 per day instead of 10 or 20, so the reviews aren't really piling up as much anymore. Honestly, I was kind of tempted to just delete my entire mining deck, but I eventually settled on just making a new one and keeping my old one for reviews only. With all of my decks combined, I have around 11,000 cards in total. And while I can definitely say that those months of extra effort helped, I'm not really sure that I'll be doing it again anytime soon. Eventually, I do think it's worthwhile to just add every unknown word, but right now I only have 11,000 cards, so I'm definitely not at that point yet. I also saw that Lever Kiwi recently started pushing for 30,000 cards. I think that's a good time to start adding every unknown word, but I still have quite a while before that, so I'm not too stressed about it right now. I do currently quite like how I've got everything set up right now, but maybe in the future I'll change something up again. And yeah, that kind of covers everything for Anki, so I'll move on to how my reading immersion has been going now. So for reading this time, I did make more of an effort to try and get more exposure to different genres that I haven't really tried yet. I started out with Classroom of the Elite, and while it definitely had more varied vocab than what I usually read, I dropped after the first 4 volumes and started reading a few random series at that point, before I eventually settled on reading Oregairu. The first few volumes were quite a challenge, but once I'd gotten more comfortable with the writing style and the characters, it definitely got a lot easier. With that said, with the amount of unknown vocab and the consistent difficulty throughout the whole series, it was actually still quite hard for me even until the very end, to be honest. I also found the story quite repetitive towards the later volumes, and after the 10th or 11th, honestly, I felt like I was just reading it to complete it, as I'd already sunk so much time into the series, I didn't really want to stop at that point. After reaching the final volume though, I did decide to stop reading and return to it once I'd kind of regained a bit more interest in the series, so hopefully that way I can actually enjoy the ending instead of just pushing through it. I kind of wanted a break from light novels after that, so I started reading a crime thriller called Grasshopper, which I really enjoyed and was definitely thankful for the change of pace. It was completely different from everything that I'd read so far, and there was a lot of really useful vocab that I was able to mine. Overall, it kind of felt like the perfect level for me. After finishing that, I read a couple of other novels that were okay, but nothing really special. But eventually I started reading AJATT, which is a 2-book mystery thriller series that is definitely one of my favourite stories so far. In the beginning it was quite difficult, as it swaps between several different perspectives and the vocab for each one is quite varied, but overall nothing really too difficult, and it was quite consistent all the way throughout. So towards the end of the first book, I'd really gotten comfortable with it, and I ended up reading the second book within a few days since I was enjoying it so much. After finishing that, I was in the mood for light novels again, and I wanted to try Kusuria no Hitorigoto, as it's been a series that I've been interested in for quite a while. So I read the first volume, and overall, the parts that I understood I really enjoyed, but honestly, for the majority of the book, it kind of felt like every other sentence had something that I didn't understand in it. There was so much unknown vocab related to the time period that it was set in. I couldn't remember most of the character names, and usually I quite enjoyed the descriptive parts of the book, but with this, half of the time I couldn't even really understand it. I even reread multiple sections, which I don't usually do, and even then I still couldn't figure out the meaning sometimes. I would say this was the first book since I started reading that I genuinely think was just a bit too far above my comprehension, and it kind of made me realise that the other times where I felt like a book was too hard for me, it was mostly just a few hard sections, and for the majority of it I understood just fine. And yeah, everything together just kind of made it a bit too overwhelming for me. After I slowly made it through the first volume, this is when I had my burnout and took a bit of a break. I'm sure if I continued reading the next few volumes, I probably would have picked up most of the vocab that I was struggling with and gotten used to the writing style. But ultimately, I decided to wait until my overall comprehension was just a bit higher, so I could hopefully enjoy the series fully instead of just understanding parts here and there. I did also try watching the first few episodes of the anime, and I did find it quite a bit easier to follow along, but I stopped there as I still prefer reading the light novels, as it gives me more time to kind of really get invested in the story and the characters properly. Honestly, I did lose some confidence after this, and I started to question whether I'd just been deluding myself into believing that I understand more than I actually do. And for sure, at times there are definitely mistakes that I make that I don't even realise I'm doing. But in the end, I'm still learning, so it is to be expected, and I shouldn't really worry about it too much. As long as I keep going, I'll eventually get to where I want to be. This is definitely the hardest book I've read so far, but I'm honestly not sure if I should have struggled as much as I did. But at least I have a series now that I can return to in a few months and hopefully see if I made any progress in that time. So after taking a few weeks break from Japanese, I started to get the itch to read again, and I settled on Arifurita, which honestly wasn't really anything special, but it seemed like the perfect level to ease me into reading on my Kindle. I did buy the Kindle a few months ago, but never really used it as the dictionaries and lookups weren't really as good compared to Yomitan. But after downloading a few new dictionaries, it was definitely a better experience this time, and I don't really find the lookups to be an issue anymore. I also just kind of prefer reading on it instead of staring at a wall of text on my computer. But anyway, after finishing the first volume of that, I kind of just wanted to try reading the first volume of ReZero just to see how hard it would be in comparison. And while it was certainly harder, it wasn't actually too bad. I'd say the first two volumes I did find quite difficult, as I had to get used to the settings, the characters, the writing style and the vocab used. But I'm currently on the 7th volume now, and it's just starting the arc that I really enjoyed when watching the anime. So I watched the first season of the anime in 2019, but apart from the main characters and the Hakuge arc, I couldn't really remember anything, so it all just feels brand new to me again. Honestly, right now I can see myself catching up to the current released volume, which will probably take me a few months, and hopefully by then I'll feel confident enough to try reading Kusuria again. And yeah, that kind of covers everything for reading over the past 6 months for me. Trying out new genres was definitely the right decision to both improve my Japanese, but also for finding books that I actually have an interest in. And I can definitely say that I've regained my enjoyment from immersing again, as I'd definitely gotten a bit bored of it before and was mostly just doing it out of a habit. But yeah, sorry this section was a bit longer than expected. I'll move on to how my listening immersion has been going now. So I definitely tried to put a bit more effort into the listening immersion this time, especially in the past month or so. I have seen some noticeable improvements, but I think it's mostly due to my overall comprehension improving rather than listening itself, to be honest. Like what I did with reading, I've been branching out into different genres and trying to watch shows that are a bit harder, but also that I have more of an interest in, instead of just slice of life anime. I am still using subtitles, which definitely makes it much easier, and I'm sure I won't make as much progress compared to if I turn them off, but I am hoping that I can make some decent improvement by watching harder, more interesting shows, and eventually reach a point where I don't need them at all. I do try to watch without subtitles where I can, like for the second half of Mushoku Tensei I didn't use them, and it wasn't really too hard to keep up, and I did find it quite enjoyable. But also, when I tried watching the first episode of Oshinoko Season 2, I couldn't really keep up since a lot of the vocab used I am aware of, but without seeing the kanji, I can't really recall the meaning from just hearing the word itself. So I'm currently watching Dungeon Meshi, which is quite hard for me honestly. Some of the cooking scenes are a bit tricky to keep up with, and some of the vocab used I haven't seen yet, especially for animals and cooking terms. But overall I'm really enjoying it, and it's much better than I was expecting, to be honest. I know it'll become easier if I just put more time into it, and now that I'm actually watching anime that I have a real interest in, I'm kind of expecting to see a lot more progress, as it's easier to find content I really want to watch now. I have also put a bit of time into trying to find Japanese YouTubers that I like. There are a couple cooking related channels that I found that are quite chill, but I wouldn't really call this main content for me, and it's more just whenever I feel like it and have the time. Unfortunately, right now I'm pretty obsessed with ReZero, so that's probably going to take most of my time over the next few months until I finish that. But I have been trying to keep up with at least 1 or 2 episodes of anime per day, just to get some immersion in. And yeah, that basically covers everything for listening since my last update. It wasn't really as much as I would have hoped for, but I have made some progress, so I can't be too upset about it. And I think over the next 6 months to a year, I'll probably be putting more than double the time that I have already. I'll quickly talk about my stats now and then move on to my current comprehension level. So the amount of hours that I spent on immersion this time have been a bit lower than usual, mostly because of the break I took, but I do usually try to get at least 4 hours in per day. I'm also not as strict with tracking times anymore, so while it's mostly accurate, it might be slightly off. I'll keep this section a bit shorter this time and just talk about the hours that I've put in since I started learning Japanese again. The total time spent on Anki is 320 hours. For reading, it's 1,920 hours, with the large majority of that being light novels with 89 read, and I'm also just under 10 million characters read, which will be a nice little milestone for me to hit soon. And finally, for listening, I've put in 230 hours, with almost all of it being anime, but also some streams and YouTube here and there. In total, over the past 450 days, I've done 2,150 hours of immersion, with an average of 5 hours per day, and 2,500 hours in total, including Anki, with an average of 5 hours and 44 minutes per day. If you're interested in seeing what I've read or watched so far, I'll leave links to my Natively and Bookmeter accounts in the description. And yeah, that's everything for my stats this time. I'll move on to my current comprehension now. So it's kind of hard to really gauge where my comprehension is compared to last time. While I can read most books that I want, there's still a lot that's out of reach by either a small margin or others that will most likely take me another year or so until I feel comfortable reading them. When it comes to novels, light novels and manga, I am pretty comfortable with those as I put the most effort into these. But when I try any other type of media like NHK News or random websites, it definitely requires more effort, but it is still doable. So this time I thought it could be quite interesting if I read a couple sections from different books and also a news article while keeping track of stuff like unknown words and grammar points. I'll start it off with a news article, and I don't really read the news, so I just chose the first thing that seemed interesting, which was about insect breeding becoming a new profession. So after reading it, I definitely could have picked something slightly harder, but even then, it had some words that I was kind of surprised that I didn't know already. There were around 2,200 characters in total, and in that I had to look up 16 words that I hadn't seen before, which are the blue highlights, and one grammar point that I didn't know, which is the purple highlight. The green highlights are repeat words, and it made me realize that even spending 15 or 20 minutes reading or watching other types of media can really be worthwhile. From now on, maybe once or twice a week, I might try reading a news article just to keep getting exposure to these kind of words that I wouldn't really come across in light novels. And after that, I read the first chapter of ReZero Volume 7. Obviously, since I'm 7 volumes in, I'm kind of comfortable with it right now. In total, it was 2,300 characters, and there were 8 unknown words for me. There weren't any repeat words or grammar points this time, and most of the words that I did look up, I did know the kanji for them, but wasn't sure in the meaning. In total, I made 3 new Anki cards, and for around 15 minutes of reading, that's not too bad to be honest. And for the final book, I read the prologue of Doshi Shoujoyo Tekyo Ute, which is something that I plan to read in the future, but right now I feel like it's kind of above my current comprehension, and it's also from a genre that I haven't really touched yet with more of a war focus. Out of the 3, this was definitely the hardest, but I did have a feeling that would be the case beforehand. Also, for some reason I couldn't change the font, so there were some words that tripped me up a bit, which definitely shouldn't have done. So it was 2,100 characters, and there were 21 unknown and 8 repeat words. It also took me about 10 minutes longer to read compared to the other 2, even though it was the same length still. There were definitely a few sentences that tripped me up a bit, especially in the small section towards the end. But apart from that, it was alright, but if I had to guess, I would say most of the book will be much harder than this. Obviously, this isn't a very accurate way of showing comprehension, but hopefully it gives a very rough idea of where I'm kind of at. Also, when reading, I still look up words other than just the ones I don't know, but for this I only mentioned the unknown words rather than every lookup. And yeah, hopefully that covers everything for my reading comprehension. I would definitely say one of the best changes I made was reading on the Kindle, and also just not caring about things like reading speed and how much I read per day. As for listening, I actually think I've seen more improvement here compared to my reading. since my listening comprehension without subtitles is still so low, even after a small amount of hours, the progress that I do make is definitely more noticeable. Honestly, it could just be that my reading is improving my overall comprehension and my listening is just getting dragged along. But even compared to 2 or 3 months ago, I am understanding a lot more with and without subtitles. I don't really find myself getting caught up as much while listening anymore. I used to pause quite often when I heard unknown words before, or even if I knew every word in the sentence, I would still stop and translate it in my head if I didn't immediately understand the sentence as a whole. I won't say that I've completely cut out the translating yet, but it's definitely far less than it used to be. And I used to do this with reading, but don't anymore, so I know it eventually will stop happening. So I can watch most anime with subtitles, apart from shows that are known for being quite difficult. And while it is still quite often that I don't understand a sentence or section, it is slowly getting easier and I am quite excited to keep improving with it. It's also not as daunting to try new genres anymore with both anime and YouTube. I think the amount of anime that I watched in the past month is more than I did in half a year before, and it actually makes me want to watch more anime now instead of having to force myself to do it. But yeah, I won't ramble on anymore. That should have covered everything for my comprehension. I'll quickly talk about any plans for the future and then end off the video. Some short-term goals over the next few months would be finishing ReZero and at least rereading the first volume of Kusuria again. I also would like to read one light novel with the audiobook synced, just to see how it goes, as that would definitely be really beneficial to try and help catch my listening up with my reading level. Once the reviews calm down a bit with Anki, I'll also probably increase my cards again to maybe 15 or 20. Right now I think I have a 500 card backlog, so I would like to try and get through that relatively soon. And I say this every video, but I do need to start prioritizing my listening a bit more. I am starting to see some downsides of only reading now. I've noticed some words I've been sub-vocalizing incorrectly for quite a while now, and I'm guessing this probably wouldn't have happened if I had been listening more than I have been. Something else I think could be quite beneficial for me is some grammar focus. Basically, up until this point, I've kind of just brute forced it, so it's definitely much worse than it should be, and I'm still pretty shaky on some aspects. So just to get a more solid understanding on some points would be really helpful. Now that my comprehension is quite decent at the moment, I think it could be time to start doing some output practice. Being able to form sentences that don't make me sound like a caveman would be quite nice, and I also eventually plan to go back to Japan in 2027, so I would really like to be able to communicate, read and listen without much effort, but that's kind of more of a broader goal for the future, rather than something I can immediately work on. There's not really much else left for me to do apart from just spending more time immersing. I know the method to improve now and what I enjoy, so it's just a matter of time until I reach my goal. I have a few other things I want to quickly talk about and then I'll finish off the video after that. So this video was slightly longer and also a bit later than usual. I'm really bad at editing, so it took me quite a while to make it, and honestly I'm kind of just addicted to ReZero right now, so I kind of just wanted to read that all the time. I've mentioned it in my other videos before, but especially when I first started learning Japanese, I would watch a lot of these kind of videos as I found it useful to hear other people's experiences and what worked and what didn't. So hopefully some people can find the same use out of my videos too. I did have a few struggles this time and also took a break from Japanese for quite a while, but overall it ended up being quite beneficial for me, and I would say I'm more motivated than ever to continue really. Over the past month after taking the break, I finally reached a point where I can genuinely say I enjoy the content I'm consuming. So immersing has really been more enjoyable than ever really. Even though in the first year I did like a lot of the books that I read, I definitely had more of a focus on improvement rather than enjoyment. So a lot of the time it felt a bit forced. But now that I'm reading what I want and also watching anime that I would watch even in English, honestly I'm not as concerned about feeling the need to improve. Obviously, some days I really don't feel like it, and on those days it's more of a habit to immerse. But honestly, for the majority of the time right now, I would genuinely rather just be immersing than spending my time on other things. Also, one last thing, I do plan on making a 21-month update video, as I do think it could be quite interesting to see the difference before and after reading ReZero as a whole. The series is 40 volumes long, and for light novels, it's actually fairly difficult, so I am expecting to see a good amount of improvement in that time. And depending on how long that takes, I might also try rereading the first volume of Kusuria and compare it to the first time I read it. But anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in a few months.